Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Borough Hall. There are 2 items on the agenda this evening. Please note that this hearing is being recorded to comply with the public law for transparency. I want to wish everyone, before I forget, a happy holiday season. Important one for all of us in this great city, and safety and enjoyable times with family and friends wished upon each and every one of you. Thank you. It will be available, as far as the recording is concerned, for viewing on Borough President Adams' website, brooklyn-usa.org. I'd like to thank Richard Bayrak, our land use director, and his associate Olga, who have worked on this ULURP hearing. We have this and Carlos Menchaca, our council member, who has joined us. Thank you for being here with us. Buddy is full of applause. That's what I appreciate. On the One Brooklyn channel on YouTube, you may access this recording. Web viewers may submit timely comments to Ask Eric at brooklynbp.nyc.gov for Borough President Adams' consideration. And my name is Diana Reina, and I'm the Deputy Borough President. This application, submitted by STGG Realty, LLC, seeks the grant of a special permit to modify floor area requirements, location use requirements, and lower accessory parking requirements for an existing privately owned commercial building within Special Sheepshead Bay District, Community District 15. Actions would facilitate a 1-story enlargement, approximately 11,000 square feet, of an existing 2-story commercial building, and a reduction of accessory parking requirements from 78 spaces to 32 spaces. Community Board 15 voted on December 15th to approve this application with modifications, seeking a guarantee that the air rights will not be sold. Would the representatives for this application please stand, state your name for the record, and present this application? Thank you.
Hello, good evening, and happy holidays to everybody.
Happy holidays.
I'll try and make it quick. I know you have a big agenda, and I don't see too many familiar faces for my application here, which I guess is a good thing.
You're still popular, nonetheless.
Well, thank you very much. This application is being brought on behalf of STGG Realty for the property at 3133 Emmons Avenue. It's between Ford and Coyle Streets on Emmons Avenue in the Sheepshead Bay District. It's located in the Special Sheepshead Bay District, and if I just may walk around here for a second, I could point out the building to you. This is the building that's at issue. It's called Prime Home Healthcare. It's a 1-story building with a mezzanine level at the 2nd floor. It stands right now about 25 feet in height. The 1st floor is at 15 feet. The 2nd floor is another 10 feet. That brings it up to a total of 25 feet at height. There's an accessory parking garage located within the building.
I'm sorry, did you state your name for the
Oh,
record?
Eric Palatnik, I apologize. There's an accessory parking garage, which you can see the entrance right here, which leads into the building, which has 44 spaces within it right now under a certificate of occupancy from the Department of Buildings when it was constructed. This is the site right here. To bring it out a little bit, the site is shown right here. And it's located within Area G of the Special Sheepshead Bay Subdistrict. We're asking permission to enlarge the building and to add a full 2nd floor at the mezzanine level. That's this portion right here. And then add a partial 3rd floor. We're adding about 11,000 square feet to the building. When we do that, we're going beyond the permitted floor area ratio for the district. Commercial building in this district, which is an R5 C22 zoning district, is allowable at 1.0 floor area ratio. That would be approximately 12,000 square feet. We're proposing to have 23,348 square feet. It's on a lot that's approximately 11,400 square feet. The increase in floor area to a 2.0 floor area is not permitted within the district. We're also requesting permission to increase the height of the building. You're allowed to have a commercial building in this zoning district up to a height of 30 feet. We're proposing a height of 35 feet. And we're also asking to reduce the required parking. You're required to have a total of 78 parking spaces. We're asking to keep the exact same parking configuration on the first floor, but it'll actually be 32 parking spaces. And I'll explain why there's a discrepancy between the 44 in the certificate of occupancy and the 32 that we're proposing here, so you can understand that in a second. In order to achieve all three of these requests, the increase in the floor area, the increase in the height, and the reduction in parking, we've been working very closely with the Plum Beach Civic Association, as well as Community Planning Board 15, as well as Councilman Deutsch, as well as the Department of City Planning, as well as your office for the past 4 years. And what we've all come up with is to create a special permit that would allow an applicant within this Area G of the Special Sheepshead Bay District to apply for a special permit to reduce the parking, increase the floor area, and increase the height. It would only apply to buildings that are on zoning lots that are 10,000 square feet or more in size. And it would only apply in Section G of the Special Sheepshead Bay Subdistrict. The board that I've just held up shows you that there are a total of 5 properties, including the subject property, that would be able to qualify for this proposed special permit within Special Sheepshead Bay Subdistrict. Of those 5, the remaining 4 are built out to their fullest potential development right now and would not be able to accommodate any enlargement to them. 3 of the buildings are developed upon with fully built out residential buildings, for which there's no opportunity for any enlargement at all. And the 4th one is a commercial building, which is at a floor area of 3.42, which is already over the 2.0 floor area that we're requesting to be allowable under the special permit. So even though the special permit would apply in Area G, it would only apply to buildings that are 10,000, zoning lots that are 10,000 square feet and more in size. And when you look at all the buildings and all the properties that are within that district, only this one property would qualify for it. So you don't have to worry, and this was a discussion we had at Community Board 15, that there'll be an over-rampant development as a result of this special permit. It's really been tailored and written in such a way that it'll affect this property. Now, the reason we're asking for the request is because the tenant there, Prime Home Healthcare, has been at this property for more than a decade. They're home health care aides. They're not a nursing home. So that's a good news, right? I've heard some people might not be so thrilled at the nursing home. Really what they do is they go around to homes and help people out, home health care aides. The people you see in like equivalent would be the visiting nurse service, I guess. Or you see there's a commercial where somebody breaks their leg skiing and somebody comes to their home to help them out. That's what they do. They employ approximately 100 people that don't necessarily work on site all of the time. They go out to the homes and they help people in their homes. But this is sort of the base for that business. So when the nurses aren't out in somebody's home helping somebody, they have paperwork to do, they have educational sessions that need to go on, they have administrative functions that need to attend to. This building is where they come back to do all of that. So a lot of the people that are working here aren't here all the time. They're only there sporadically throughout the week, and they come and go from the building. So there's not necessarily a need to have all of the parking that would be required, the 78 parking spaces that are needed, primarily because of the fact that people are coming and going all the time, and this isn't the primary place of work for the people. The rooms that we're creating and the offices that we're creating are areas for training sessions so that people can come and be trained, and people could report to their superiors, and there could be meetings. There are people, of course, that are executives within the organization and full-time employees that work within the building, but that's only about 60 people that work there throughout the week. The remaining people come and go, as I just mentioned. There's an opportunity for jobs. These are very highly skilled jobs, and as we're enlarging the building, it's going to accommodate more nurses that can come and go from the facility. So we're hoping to create more jobs as a result of this. Now, I mentioned at the beginning that there's a discrepancy between the parking. The certificate of occupancy calls for 44 parking spaces. We're proposing to have 32. So the question naturally arises, I'm sure in your head, there's such skilled land use people in front of me, probably saying, how are you going from 44 spaces now to 32 if you're not touching the parking area? The reason for that is because during the course of review with the Department of City Planning, they applied a parking requirement that's currently utilized in parking lots. and they put a dimension of how big the parking spaces should be. It's valet parking within the garage. And the dimension that's applied today under current code is 18 feet by 8 feet 6 inches. That wasn't the dimension that was used by the Department of Buildings when the building was built. So although the parking garage could fit 44 cars, and that's actually what was approved by the Department of Buildings, and that's what reads on the certificate of occupancy, City Planning did not feel, technical review at City Planning didn't feel it was proper to bring the application and utilize an outdated parking count, a parking size. So what they did was they applied the 18 by 8, and when you do that, it comes out, multiplies out to 32 spaces. In reality, the parking garage could fit quite a few more cars than's provided right there on that plan. The 44 that currently exists right now, in fact, is what it could accommodate. But for purposes of this application and to be consistent with current standards for parking spaces, it was proposed to designate 32 spaces. That is essentially the application. We have been working very closely, as I mentioned earlier, with the Civic Association as well as the Community Board. I think a couple more questions I think that I heard from the Borough President's office. I had the chance to speak with Olga beforehand. Was what is our intention for any green measures? We're not doing a wholesale rebuilding of the building, but we can certainly utilize a green roof, a white roof on the building to repel the sunlight. Excuse me?
Wait for questions.
I'll wait for questions. I'll hold off then. I apologize. That's it. That's our presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much, Eric. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And at this moment, we just want to understand, if you could just remind me again, the board that had the Plum Beach area? The Sheepshead Bay. And so what flood zone is that area?
It's a flood zone AE.
Mm-hmm. And so,
Is
if
a-
memory serves me correctly, in my council days, we had many businesses impacted in that area. And the G area of this commercial strip, how affected was it by Superstorm Sandy issues?
Well, the whole strip was underwater during
Correct,
during
but H is
Sandy.
before G, and so I'm just trying to understand if that was a buffer before hitting G.
No, no. This is it took water in just like everything else did.
Okay.
Luckily, the first floor here is a parking garage.
Right.
So there was no damage to the building. And all of the mechanicals, as a part of this application, when they rebuild the building, are all being lifted up to higher elevations as well. So they're not going to run into any of those problems. But we're lucky in the design of the building that was already designed with the parking garage at the first floor. The base flood elevation there, just for your records, is at a level of 3 feet 8 inches. So all the heights that I mentioned before, the increase in height, all is measured from that 3 foot 8 inch mark.
And so no further review for Superstorm Sandy mitigation measures have been applied other than what is the standard of what you were already designed as?
Correct. There's been no requirement under the zoning text or under any of the new flood regulations for there to be any other mitigation impacts on the building.
And as far as your sustainability answers, if we could go back to
Yes.
just what other factors have you applied to your expansion in relation to the connectivity of your existing structure and your new structure to introduce what would be sustainability and renewable energy resources?
Well, when I've heard about the questions, what we did was I spoke with the project architect, and what they've agreed to do is to look, of course, replace all lighting within the building. So everything is going to be LED lighting within the building to lower the electricity usage. They're also looking at putting in a new boiler system that'll be a high-efficiency boiler system. The windows that are being installed at the second floor that's being enlarged as well as the third floor are going to be double insulated windows that are going to have, I forget the term that he used, but it's going to be a refractive measure within it so that sunlight does not shine in as brightly and heat up the space, therefore causing an increase in the air conditioning usage. These are the kinds of modifications that we can make to the existing building as we're adding on to it.
And so in addition to that, did the architects mention or was the request made as the applicant to look at passive design?
Not really, because it's just a modification to the existing structure. So there's not a great opportunity here. If we were building ground up, there's a lot more measures that we would be able to put in place, but being as that we're just enlarging an existing structure, we could apply the new standards in the new portions that we're constructing, but obviously it's it's quite cost ineffective to rip down things that are already built and rebuild.
Well,
So-
for instance, your windows doesn't necessarily have to be double pane, they can be triple pane.
Correct. The architect thinks that the double pane, though, with the refractive glass, will actually achieve the same exact standards as the triple pane would by not allowing the sunlight to heat up the space. But we could look at triple pane now that you're mentioning it.
And we would most appreciate it. We're trying to really elevate what our sustainability practices in design and construction, retrofit and new construction, so we're leaving nothing off the table. And just, we need partners like yourselves to be able to really push that agenda so that we have long-term savings as opposed to shortcuts.
And the owner is very supportive of that. A representative of the owner is here today, and they're hearing what you're saying.
Right. And our land use director is just making sure I don't forget the issues of the roof as far as measures like a green roof, beyond what is the standard, white roof. The opportunity to be able to introduce what would be practices of sustainable retention of stormwater runoff, anything that you've looked at beyond what would be a white roof.
And I think we're amenable to that. Again, the owner is here, a representative of the owner is here tonight with me, and we've spoken about it before, the call we had today before the hearing. They said they're very amenable to any measures that could be undertaken without a wholesale renovation of the existing building, but anything new being constructed,
Correct.
they'd be happy to accommodate the requests.
And
It's
that's-
good for them also, obviously.
Correct. I agree with you, and just understanding that we cannot forget about the Sheepheads Bay area being in that flood zone sensitivity, to be able to introduce certain elements that can help
Especially the
with that.
stormwater retention, because when it rains, all the water ends up in Sheepshead Bay. So
Correct.
the more that we can keep
So
on
those are long-term
the
issues we're gonna
property,
continue to have.
we'd be happy to.
And Eric, as far as this particular board on the floor, the bioswales I noticed are not introduced on the property. Is this something that was not factored in? Is it something that you're going to take a look at as far as introduction of street trees and opportunities of expanding beyond what is the function of just having a tree for shade, but all the other...
You're actually the first person that's mentioned that.
I'm sure. I
And
always am.
we'd be happy to comply
I
with
would appreciate
any
it.
conditions if you wanted to put into your recommendation.
Absolutely.
The owners are anxious to construct the building because they are going to profit from an enlargement. They're going to have a business there that is going to hopefully sustain the building as well as produce profit for the operator. So anything that we can give back to the community while we're doing that, they're more than happy to accommodate. And I think more street trees, the green roof, all the mitigation measures you just spoke about are very simple, easy things that they
Correct.
could accommodate and still achieve their goals, which is what they're after, is producing more space. So we'd be happy to.
Fantastic. And I don't want to limit what would be my comments to just what would be green roof, but solar panel opportunity to work on understanding whether or not there's an assessment on your roof that can host what would be.
Well, they do
solar
have a lot of
panel.
exposure to the southern sky, so it's something we'll talk about with them, definitely.
Fantastic. Moving on to what would be local employment opportunities. And if you could just share what would be the protocols as far as individuals who are viewing what would be this segment of our ULURP hearing interested in becoming a home health aide or any other opportunities through this expansion for employment. And in addition to that, local contracting with local businesses to be able to supply what would be any supply demand of your needs as a facility on this commercial strip.
Take it one by one. As far as employment goes for the jobs that are there now going to be created, there's already a strong local base of people that are already employed there, and we would like to hire whoever's necessary in the future locally. It makes for a better employment opportunity both for the employee as well as the employer. These jobs are highly skilled jobs, and if people come to us with the proper training in place to be a home health care aide, because there's obviously an educational component that's required,
And so, Eric, if
we'd
you
be
could
happy
just
to.
allow for the viewer to understand what that means. Is there a job site training program?
Not to become a home health care aide. For that, they need to go to a specialized school in order to become a home health care aide. You
Not
can't-
necessarily, because you have not-for-profits that offer those type of trainings on-site, as they have
Oh,
case management, yes.
And they're looking for skilled employees. If there's a program out there that you're familiar with, that we could bring in a training program on site, they'd be happy to go and interview those people and work with that organization.
Fantastic.
As far as all the administrative staff goes and things of that nature, they're happy to hire locally. As far as building goes, they're more than anxious to buy local, to source locally, and to utilize local construction companies to develop, as well as to taking a look. We don't have much experience with it, but I'm sure you could educate us a little bit more with minority and women-owned businesses, which we'd be happy to work with as well. Ultimately, the job will be bid out, of course, but we'd like to give everybody the opportunity. If we could further advance a program that the borough president is supportive of, as well as the councilman, we'd be happy to do that.
And your bid is in formation right now, as far as the description of that bid.
Yeah, we've been at city planning for 4 years, so we're all sort of.
You're ready to go?
We're getting ready to go
Right.
now. Yeah, I think it's
And-
taken everybody a little while to realize that we're actually got to where we are now. So
Sure.
now we're going to that next step.
So if you could just supply our office with the bid description, so that way we can just communicate that as a public notice? To
We'd
the
be happy
FWD
to. I'll stay in
community?
touch with your staff, and
That would be
we'll provide them
fantastic.
with all the information as we progress to the next step. Should we get approved at city planning, I don't want to be so presumptuous, because that is our next step.
Of course.
But should you support us and should they support us, then we'll be happy to continue the relationship.
And the opportunity to engage further with the community as far as the community board is concerned and our office, we just want to have open lines of communication to follow through on all these items.
You're blessed to have Community Board 15 in your district. They've been very open with us. We've met with them 4 or 5 times during the course of the past 2 years. We've met with the councilman a few times within the past few years. He's taken office in the midstream of it, and we've also had meetings with the Plum Beach Civic Association. So we already have those lines of communication open, and we're happy to maintain them.
Fantastic. Thank you for your commitment, and we will continue to be in conversation with you regarding all these items, and as you move forward to city planning with our decision.
Thank you very much for your time, and thanks for letting us jump ahead. Thank you.
At this moment, we don't have any speakers for this application. Correct me if I'm wrong. Thank you for participating in this public hearing. This item will now be closed. And we're going to go to calendar item Oxford Nursing Home 150361, ZMK 150362, ZSK 150363, ZCK. These applications submitted by Conover King Realty LLC seek an amendment to the zoning map, a special permit, and a certification to facilitate the development of a 200-bed nursing home and ambulatory diagnostic and treatment facility in a newly developed 8-story building in the Red Hook section of Community District 6. Community Board 6 voted on December 9th to approve this application with the provision that the developer's commitment letter to the community be incorporated into the approval of the applications. Would the representatives for this application please state your name and present your application for the record?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Nora Martins. I'm from Davidoff, Hutcher, and Citron, land use attorney for the applicant. I'm joined today by colleagues from my firm, as well as the project architect, H2M, and the owners of Oxford Nursing Home. So we'll all be available for questions after the presentation. The project that's on today is Oxford Nursing Home, as you mentioned. We're seeking. sorry. We're seeking, as you mentioned, 4 land use actions, so we're here before you as part of the ULURP process. The project here has a long history, starting in 2003 when Oxford purchased the site to house a replacement facility for their current location on South Oxford Street in Fort Greene. They received a certificate of need from the Department of Health in 2009 for the 200-bed replacement facility. However, in 2006, the site, which is located, might be easier here to see, it's bounded by Conover. Is this? Sorry. It's bounded by Conover Street, King Street, and Sullivan Street in Red Hook on a block that fronts on Van Brunt Street. They purchased the site. It was located in an IBZ, the Southwest Brooklyn Industrial Business Zone, in 2006, after they bought it, but before they received their certificate of need from the Department of Health. When they approached city planning for the necessary land use actions to facilitate the development of the nursing home, they learned about the site's location in the IBZ. In 2013, the boundaries of the IBZ were revised by the Boundary Commission. One of the revisions that was undertaken was to remove this site. This map shows the Southwest Brooklyn IBZ boundaries. You can see our site here. No longer located within the IBZ. The reasons for the removal of this site from the IBZ were specifically to facilitate the development of the nursing home based on the site's historic underutilization for manufacturing use, its proximity to the residential district that runs along Van Brunt and to the east, and the proposed community facility development. As you can see, use map, the area of Red Hook is very mixed both in use and in the type of development. The site is located within an M21 zoning district, which is a medium intensity manufacturing district. A small portion of the site is located within an R5 C13 district, which runs along Van Brunt Street. The M21 is located primarily to the west, and R5 and R6 zoning districts are located to the east. These photos show in context the area of Red Hook. It's hard to see. It's a little hard to see, I apologize, but the site is located right. So as you can see, along Van Brunt Street, there is lower rise development. However, throughout Red Hook, there are areas with larger scale development, including along Imlay Street, in the NYCHA houses, which are located just 3 blocks to the east, and also along Conover Street. The proposed actions that are necessary to facilitate this development, which is, as Diana mentioned, a 200-bed nursing home facility along with a 26,000 square foot ambulatory diagnostic and treatment facility, include a zoning map amendment to rezone the M21 zoning district to an MX5, which is an M14, a light intensity manufacturing district, coupled with an R6 zoning district, which is a medium density residential district. Although the project is a community facility development, the residential zoning is required to allow the community facility to be developed. The project also requires a certification from city planning, which all nursing homes require in residential districts, and a special permit to allow the maximum permitted community facility FAR, which is 4.8, to apply to the nursing home portion of the development. The ambulatory diagnostic and treatment facility is already permitted to go to a 4.8, assuming the proposed rezoning. The building is actually proposed to be a 3.7 FAR, so it does not achieve the maximum permitted FAR. And finally, an action that was added prior to certification of the project by city planning is a text amendment in line with the city's mandatory inclusionary housing policy. Although we are not seeking to build any housing, and therefore the inclusionary housing text amendment would not apply because we're rezoning to a residential district. So the administration has asked us to include that in our application as a matter of policy. This map shows up the proposed zoning change map, which, as you can see, the site is located. This is the current zoning map. We are on the M21, but right on the border of the R5. This map on the right shows the project location within the proposed MX zoning district. The site right now is about 40,000 square feet. It's historically been underdeveloped, mainly used for open storage uses. Currently, it's occupied by bus storage, storage for 2 construction companies, and a welding shop, which is the main employer on the site, employs about 5 people on any given day. Other than that, there's no active job activity on the site. Here's some photos of the existing site conditions. You can see the various frontages: Conover Street, King Street, and Sullivan Street. You can see the main uses for container and construction storage, and also for bus parking. The proposed program of the nursing home is 200 beds. This is a slight downsize from the current facility, which is 235 beds. However, the facility now will be state-of-the-art, much larger, replacing a facility that's almost in a building that's 100 years old, and it's been operating there for over 60 years. It's a family-owned business. It started now in the 3rd generation of administration. They are operating at the South Oxford Street location with several waivers from the Department of Health and pending approval of this replacement facility, which, as I mentioned, was approved by the Department of Health in 2009. Currently, the facility at South Oxford Street has about 200 employees. They anticipate adding about 25 jobs at the new facility based on the larger size and the ability to provide more short-term rehab care, which will require more staffing. They hope to take as many employees as possible from their Fort Greene location, but they expect that there will be some attrition, and they look forward to hiring locally to fill those positions. Also, they will have some existing residents that they will bring from their Fort Greene location. However, they have a high turnover rate. This year alone, they had almost 180 admissions, so there are always beds available. And again, these would be available to Red Hook residents. The way that the referral process works, generally, they receive referrals from hospitals. Once a person has an incident that requires them to go to the hospital or to a doctor, they are then referred to a nursing home facility for whether it's short-term care or long-term care, and that referral is almost always based on the person's place of residence or near family. So if a Red Hook resident were to require a nursing home, it's extremely likely they would be placed at this facility, pending an available bed. The second component of the project is an ambulatory diagnostic and treatment facility. This would be open to the public, although it would also serve the nursing home residents, which is a benefit in that it allows their treatment to be contained in one building and reduces transport, beneficial to the community and also to the residents. Right now, it's a 26,000 square foot space. We are contemplating urgent care. Oxford is in active discussions with urgent care providers to gauge their interest in this site. Throughout we've been reaching out to the community now since early in the summer, and we have found that there was a need for that type of service. That Red Hook is very underserved with regard to healthcare, and a 24/7 urgent care facility is something that is not provided in the neighborhood now. I mean, our location of our site is in walking distance to most of Red Hook, and we think that could be a real asset to the community. Both the nursing home and the ambulatory diagnostic would accept all insurances, Medicaid, and Medicare. This plan shows the proposed site plan for the facility. The nursing home will be 7 stories with an 8th floor that is set back from the street, and the ambulatory diagnostic and treatment center will front on Conover Street. That will be 7 stories with its main entrance on Conover Street. The main entrance to the nursing home will be on King Street. Vehicular access to the parking, which is located at grade, will be from Sullivan Street. There will be ingress and egress onto Sullivan Street, but there will also be an exit only on Conover Street to allow vehicles dropping off, ambulettes, people coming just to drop off patients or visitors to exit onto Conover Street to improve the flow of traffic and reduce any on-street loading or unloading, because we understand all these streets are one-way, they're narrow streets, and traffic is a concern. The building was originally proposed to be 8 and 9 stories. In response to concerns we heard from the community, We reduced the bulk of the building by 1 full floor. We are constrained by the program of the nursing home, which is 200 beds at 40 beds per floor, along with other supporting spaces. For example, a dining room is required on every floor. But David from H2M really worked with Oxford to squeeze the space as much as possible and reduce the size. It was originally about 175,000 square feet. The building is now at 157.5. Unfortunately, combined with the flood elevation, which I'll discuss on the elevation drawings, and these program requirements, this height of building is the smallest we can make it at this point. Here's the elevation from King Street, which is the main entrance to the nursing home. You can see there on the left. The building is 89 feet tall, with 4 feet of parapet at the 8th floor, which is set back, as you can see. The building is also set, the base flood elevation is 10, so the design flood elevation is 11. Based on the existing grade, that would mean we would have to raise our first floor to 5 feet above grade. The first floor of the nursing home is actually 15 feet above grade, so we not only comply with the building code requirements, but far exceed them. The only spaces that are located at grade are building entries, and those would be a combination of wet and dry flood-proofed to ensure resiliency. The remainder of the ground floor at grade is occupied by on-site parking, 53 spaces. That's about 10 spaces more than required by the zoning. This is an elevation at Sullivan Street. You can see that the ambulatory diagnostic on the left and then the nursing home on the right. And this is the frontage for Conover Street, which is the ambulatory diagnostic and treatment facility. So rendering of the proposed project. So you can see the 2 portions of the development, the nursing home and the ambulatory diagnostic, have been treated different architecturally to try to be more consistent with the existing development in Red Hook. That was also a comment that was received during our public outreach. Finally, we've placed the facility in context, so you can see how it compares with the surrounding area. So you can see there's similarly sized development along, this is Conover Street here, Imlay Street, and then you have to the east, you have the Red Hook houses east and west. And there's the facility, the proposed facility located to the right there. The project is about a $65 million private investment. We anticipate it will generate approximately 600 construction jobs, 400 direct and 200 indirect. We'll also have permanent employment opportunities, which Oxford Nursing Home is committed to hiring locally, and will work with the community board and with the Borough Presidents office, hopefully, to ensure that all job opportunities are advertised locally. They will also do their own local advertisements, both prior to the opening of the facility, as they see what their needs are, and as availabilities become open in the facility once it begins to operate. They're also committed to working with local, to do local purchasing and working with local businesses. So we mentioned before the healthcare services here. I mean, the services that can be provided by a 26,000 square foot urgent care center that are open 24/7, I think speak for themselves. And the fact that there's also going to be 200 beds in a community district that only has one other nursing home located in Cobble Hill is a huge benefit to Red Hook. While there is a large manufacturing component to the neighborhood, there are also more than 10,000 residents, including one of the largest housing developments in Brooklyn and in New York. We had received during our public process some comments on traffic. So I mentioned before we had revised the traffic plan to include an exit only on Conover Street to eliminate on-site loading and dropping off of patients and visitors. So that was one change we made through this process, and that feedback was appreciated because we think the project is improved. Although the SECRA analysis that was done in connection with the land use application did not result in any further traffic study or any mitigation, that we did that traffic study as a supplemental study to ensure that traffic would not be an issue here. Oxford is also committed to encouraging their employees to take public transportation, including providing a shuttle bus from the subway, and also encouraging all visitors through an education program to make sure they take public transportation. Also, all loading, there's a loading berth on site, so all loading and delivery will take place on site, not on the street. This slide shows some flood resiliency measures that are being taken in addition to the building being located 15 feet above grade, which is significantly above the design flood elevation requirement. They will provide an emergency diesel generator with 72 hours supply. They have a detailed emergency preparedness plan, which includes an evacuation plan. They have transfer agreements with other nursing homes and hospitals, and also agreements with ambulance company to transport patients in the event of a crisis, such as Hurricane Sandy. They also, the evacuation plan is extensive, includes a succession plan to make sure staffing levels are ensured, and that is something that they currently maintain at their facility. They have training, they have oversight from the Department of Health, which is constantly surveying their emergency preparedness plan, and that would, of course, be continued at this proposed new facility. That concludes my presentation, so I'm happy to answer questions.
First, thank you so much for your presentation. I want to thank the community for coming out. We have representatives from Congresswoman Nydia Velasquez's office. Dan, what's that? Dan Weiland is here as well. And I just want, there seemed to have been some, before we get into the question phase, there seemed to have been some confusion around the process we use to notify all of our hearings, our ULURP hearings. We try to be as transparent as possible, and I think Richard does an excellent job in doing so. And just so you'll know, these hearings are not part of the ULURP process. We are not required to have these hearings. We do it because we want to hear from the community. And we think it's so important to hear from the community. And I spend a lot of time in various parts of Brooklyn so we can hear firsthand. I'm a firm believer if you want to be a good shepherd, you got to hang out with the sheeps. And so we like to hear from you. That's why these hearings takes place. If you believe there's a better way to get the information out to you, please let us know. You can send me an email. You could come to Borough Hall and knock on the door and say, Eric, we have some good advice, some good tips. It's all about how do we share information and how do we learn from each other. I don't have all the answers and all the solutions, but I'm always open to learn. You don't have to blog me, tweet me, email me. I'm into human interaction. So if there's something we can do better, feel free to reach out and let me know how to do it better. And I promise you we will incorporate that in how do we go about informing the public is our goal. One thing people have never complained about is the number of communications they receive from this office. We send out a lot of communications. We are extremely transparent. We like for you to know what we do. I subscribe to the Sims model. An educated consumer is my best customer. So I just want to let you know that. So we have a series of questions that we want to ask, but what I would like to do, I would like to let our Congress, wow, am I predicting something? I'd like to let our council person, Carlos Machaca, who has been here, to ask the questions, and then I'm going to turn it over to Diana. Diana, you've been running this board, and then you can ask a series of questions that you want as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Borough President. And I also want to echo that work that you do out of this office and especially out of the land use process. I know that you are committed to connecting the work that we do here in the city to our residents, and that's being exhibited here tonight. This is not a mandatory part of the process, and so I want to really thank you and your office to making that happen. I really don't want to speak too much, but I do want to lay out a couple things that I have been consistently talking about when thinking about this project. As you know, this will end up at the City Council, and we will have that final vote. And so part of this process has really been to engage communities or different parts of the community across the board. Zoning, and in this case, rezoning, is a pretty complicated thing anyway. And so what we want to do is make sure that people know about the process and how it works and how you can get involved in that process. Which means that we have to be incredibly thoughtful as we consider this proposal. There's a lot of zoning right now that's in process for us as community. The mayor has his rezonings. The borough president has been incredible at bringing people in and talking to us as council members, as community board members, and this does not fall outside that sense of responsibility. And I do want to say that this project did start in 2003, and as was discussed, this project, or I should say, a lot has changed since 2003. The IBZs were created. The IBZs were changed since 2003. A sense of urgency around climate change, and we've seen the impacts of climate change in Sandy. And I'm not going to have to repeat myself again, but what Sandy really is the thing that drove me even to run for city council in the first place. That's something that's really near and dear to my heart. Also, this is a new administration. You have a new council member, you have a new borough president, and you have a new mayor, which means that we have a whole new administration that can look at this and understand the changes that have happened and be thoughtful in this process. And that's what we're doing here today. I also want to say that there's things that haven't changed. And I have met now 3 times. My office has met with the applicant 3 times now. And every time we connect with them, there's nothing removing the passion that the owners have in nursing, and the fact that 1199 is connected to that, the union. This is an incredibly important business in our city, and so I don't want to remove that from this conversation as well, which is why I'm very much in support of trying to find a space for them, just not in Red Hook and not in this site. And so I'm really asking us all to think through this together as a community, and this is not a divided community in Red Hook. We have people who are living in all parts of this district that have concerns, but we also have folks that are in support of this as well. That's why we're here, and that's why we're listening to you to make that best decision. So I want to hand it back over to the borough president, and as we really think through this, there's some comments that we're going to hear from the community about climate change, resiliency, is this spot zoning? Do we really actually solve the issues in the community by bringing this kind of level of infrastructure? Is this out of character? How much do we advocate for our industrial business zones that is diminishing by the day in our city? These are all concerns, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Menchaca. So we just want to get a little bit of clarity here. Your certificate of need for Oxford Nursing Home at the Fort Greene location is approved for how many beds?
They have 235 beds at the Fort Greene location.
And no diagnostic center?
No, just the nursing home.
And when was the certificate of need issued for the Oxford Nursing Home proposed site?
For the replacement facility, certificate of need was issued in 2009.
And that was for 200 beds?
200 beds.
In addition to in addition to the diagnostic center?
Yes.
And the diagnostic center went in as part of the application for the certificate of need?
That
to
is
the state?
something I would have to clarify. That's something I'd have to get back to you on. I believe it was included, but specifically.
Can we get the answer for that?
Sure, of course.
I think
Yeah.
I think there's a gentleman in the back who's trying to
Sorry.
give you.
It was not.
It
No,
was
the ambulatory diagnostic was not part of it.
the certificate of
Right.
need. And so the standalone application for the certificate of need was for an approval process for the nursing home only.
Yes, the 200 beds.
And The diagnostic center that is being proposed today is for what purpose?
The purpose is to provide, really it's to provide a benefit to the community. The site here can support that additional ambulatory diagnostic and treatment facility. It would be helpful to the nursing home. I mean, a newer nursing home provides more short-term rehab. It's not just long-term care. So having that additional support there is helpful, and it's also a benefit to the community. Red Hook is an underserved community with regard to healthcare. It would be an urgent care center that would be open to the public, and it's something that we've heard throughout our public outreach as a really positive aspect of the project.
So we've been hosting roundtables regarding what would be urgent care need in pockets of neighborhoods such as Red Hook. And one of the fascinating comments was an emergency room doctor who brought to our attention that urgent care facilities are not necessarily the answer to address what would be the healthcare needs, but they're privately owned facilities that don't necessarily address what would be primary care. And so what the Red Hook community is looking for is primary care, not necessarily urgent care.
Right.
So I just wanted to make sure that we had a clear understanding as to the needs of Red Hook.
If I can just add to that quickly, what we'd be proposing here, I mean, it's a fairly large space, 26,000 square feet. So it'd be a more comprehensive urgent care facility, 24/7, but it would also have primary care. It would be something that you could address. People would come in, be treated as they would in an urgent care, but also be able to come back for follow-up. They would even have follow-up in the home. That is the model that we are looking to put in this facility.
But that was not the original model. The original model was a nursing home.
Right. The facility now is just a nursing home. And the model here is nursing home plus this additional facility, this additional healthcare facility.
And under the current zoning that you're seeking, you're proposing expanding what would be further footprint from beyond what is the actual proposed site for the Oxford nursing home.
Right, yes. There's the nursing home portion, and then there is the ambulatory diagnostic and treatment facility portion of the
Beyond
building.
those two portions, if you could go back to the slide.
Yeah, sure.
For the rezoning.
Sorry.
So
Oh,
that
sorry.
particular zoning that's the proposed and the current. And the current zoning is MX5,
No, the current zoning is M21
M21, and you're proposing to change it to?
and MX5.
So you're trying to expand the MX5 that exists adjacent to?
There is an MX5 that exists a few blocks south. It's not an expansion of the same MX5 district, but it does exist further south in Red Hook.
And what is the need for your MX5 as opposed to just leaving it as M2-1?
We can't have the nursing home in an M21 zoning district. It's a use group 3, which requires a residential or commercial zoning designation.
And so that goes back to the original issue as far as seeking land that is in manufacturing zoned area where the city of New York is trying to protect industrial spaces to be able to provide what would be the production and manufacturing industry with these types of spaces that we're zoning ourselves out of. And so to purposely purchase something that you're not zoned for seems to raise concern, or does raise concern in the issue of trying to chip away at something that is clearly in the opposite direction of what uses there are in this particular area.
Sure. So to respond to that, we see it's really two questions. One is the site selection, which it's very difficult to find a site of adequate size for this type of facility.
So Greenpoint Hospital is an old hospital. And I know that there are several old hospitals throughout Brooklyn that could have served for the same purposes with already what would have been certificate of needs that could have been issued and facilitated what would be the same purpose. So I'm just trying to understand why that area in an IBZ area understanding that IBZs were designated in 2006 and then modified for the purposes of accommodating this, because this was purchased pre-existing lines of IBZs, but this was also before we had IBZs, we had empire zones, and this was an empire zone.
I can't speak right now to why this site was specifically selected above any other sites. I'm not familiar with the other sites. I do know that retrofitting an existing building is challenging. One of the appeals, they were looking for a vacant or nearly vacant site to build a really state-of-the-art facility. One of the challenges they have with their existing facility is that it was a retrofit of an existing building and really does not meet nursing home standards. They get waivers every year from the Department of Health and basically premised on this replacement facility. So I can respond to that in greater detail, perhaps in writing after this hearing, but as to why this site was selected, compared to others, I can't speak to that. However, rather than thinking of it as a chipping away at the manufacturing zone, we see it as an expansion of the adjacent residential zone.
Just 1 second, I just want to understand, you're going to write to us to let us know other site selections that were vetted in the process of having chosen this one, others that were looked at?
I will speak with the applicant and see if they looked at other sites, why they weren't sufficient, and to get more clarity on why this site, despite its manufacturing designation, was the most appropriate site for them to site this facility.
I appreciate that clarity.
Of course.
And you were in the middle of a sentence.
Oh, sorry, I was just explaining that the second part of your question was about chipping away at the manufacturing zone. We understand and appreciate preserving active manufacturing, and not just preserving active manufacturing, but allowing new manufacturing to come in to these areas. This site, however, is on the periphery. It's actually partially within a residential zone. It's surrounded by a lot of non-conforming residential use. I mean, the M21 was placed on this property in 1961. The zoning has changed many, many times throughout the city since 1961 to reflect how communities have developed. This neighborhood is very residential. It has a very strong manufacturing presence, but it can't be said that there's not a strong residential community here. So we see this as basically, even next to our site, there's non-conforming residential. Across the street from our site, all along Van Brunt Street, adjacent to our site, there's residential development. So we see this as, it's a community facility. We're not building residential. We're building a community facility. It's a business. This is a business. It will employ over 200 people, and it will act basically, the MX zones are basically buffer zones between heavier intensity manufacturing districts and residential districts. And in consultation with city planning, we determined that this was appropriate based on existing land use patterns, and also the fact that that site, obviously it hasn't been developed while it's been held by the applicant, because they were hoping to build this nursing home, but prior to that, it's historically been underdeveloped. Despite its large size, it was not developed for an active manufacturing use. As I mentioned, it's mainly been used for open storage. So for all of those reasons, we see that this is an appropriate land use designation. We don't think all manufacturing zones should be changed like this, but in this specific location, based on the surrounding development and the nature of the proposed development, which is a community facility, we believe it is appropriate.
You had mentioned the existing employees of the Oxford Nursing Home will experience what would be a decline. Many will be, there will be attrition, you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Is that by way of choice, or a layoff, or severance package?
Oxford Nursing Home would they value their staff. They have a great staff, they could tell you. They would like all of them to come. But the reality is some of them may decide not to transfer to the Red Hook location. And in that event, they would look forward to filling those spaces, and also additional spaces that are available just due to the larger size of the facility locally, to hire locally.
In your transportation study, was there any travel time assessment for what would be an employee to this facility lacking the infrastructure transportation-wise?
No, because that would depend on where the employee was coming from, so that wasn't required as part of the secret process, and we did not undertake that study.
And part of, one of the major issues raised by community is the lack of connectivity for public transportation, the issue of having to get here, what would be primarily vehicular, and the study indicated that there would be less vehicular traffic despite what would be your ambulance service or ambulette service.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Wouldn't your diagnostic center and nursing home facility have what would be ambulance service as well as ambulette service?
Yes, that would be part of
And
the process.
that would not increase vehicular traffic?
Traffic would absolutely be increased over what is currently at the site, which is basically storage. There would be an increase, but the amount of traffic that would be generated did not trigger any sort of transportation threshold in the environmental analysis. It was deemed to be below the threshold that would require mitigation.
And so what threshold was that?
That I would have to get back to you. It's in the environmental
I would like
documents.
to understand what that threshold was
Sure.
in order to compare what designated that there would not be.
It will certainly be
Further.
increased. It will be increased. But Oxford is sensitive to that. And they, as I mentioned before, would like to encourage all their employees and visitors to take public transportation. Again, while there will be 200 residents, they are not typically moving in and out of the facility. It's mainly employees and visitors. Their current facility, they have maybe 10 visitors at any given time. Employees, there are over 200. However, they work in shifts around the clock. So they're not all coming in at 9 a.m. during rush hour and leaving at 5 p.m. So they are staggered.
10 visitors in one day?
No, at any given time.
At any
So
given
say
time.
at noon, there will be 10 visitors in the facility. And they also will provide, as we mentioned, the community board, we committed some sort of shuttle service so that to further encourage employees to take public transportation to the facility.
And as far as your reduction of one floor, considering that there's a diagnostic center that does not have to be added to the facility, one could say that your design could only be a nursing home straight across and reduce what would be the floors that are being proposed by more than one, which you have already stated is a reduction and would not see what would be any further reductions. But if you were to remove the actual diagnostic center, which was not part of the certificate of need from the state, that your nursing home could definitely just spread across the footprint as opposed to pushing what would be two different facilities onto this one footprint.
I wish that we could do that. That would resolve the height issue. Unfortunately, even if we were to remove the whole 7-story ambulatory diagnostic, the nursing home would maintain the same height because of it has to have 40 beds per floor. So that's 5 floors right there, plus 1 floor of supports. You need laundry, you need a kitchen, you need all
But
that.
that can go to the side. That doesn't have to be on each floor.
Right, okay. So we could possibly look into that, but the vertical plan is much more efficient for the way the nursing home operates to be able to have the support facility all located in line with the beds, which are located 40 beds per floor. So unfortunately, you can't say, why don't you put 50 beds per floor, take it down another floor. Unfortunately, we can't do that. Also, as we mentioned, we're elevated 15 feet in the air for flood resiliency. We can't put anything on the ground floor or in the basement, which is where these facilities would typically be located, these type of support spaces. So while it's possible that removing the ambulatory diagnostic would just reduce the bulk of the building, the height would really not be affected.
But you would affect it by 1 or 2 more floors.
It's possible. That's something that I can't respond to without looking at it, because if you have circulation issues, then you would have to move. For example, if your kitchen was all the way on one side, you'd have to move things all the way to the other end of the building. We can look at that, but I don't think that it would be a substantial reduction. But we can definitely take a look at that.
Is this project viable without the diagnostic center financially?
Yes, financially it's viable without the
And so
diagnostic center.
what is the purpose of adding the diagnostic ambulatory center?
2 reasons. One, it makes it a better nursing home because it allows you to treat patients. For example, if they have an issue in the nursing home, they can receive primary care or emergency care treatment right next door, as opposed to having to take an ambulance to the hospital. And the second reason is that is the public benefit. It provides a service to the community. It makes it a more comprehensive healthcare facility rather than just a nursing home that's an island in the community.
And as far as your building specifics, the new construction of this particular design, is it going to have sustainable and renewable energy resources to advance a sustainable design, or any practices of retaining stormwater runoff, bioswales, as far as trees?
Right, so we're still in the preliminary process of designing the building and down to those details. There will be a stormwater detention system introduced, which will be a huge improvement over the current site, which is all paved asphalt and currently has a high amount of stormwater runoff. With regard to other environmental measures, I'd like to just invite David Mamina from H2M to speak to that quickly, if you don't mind.
Good evening, David Mamina, H2M Architects and Engineers. In terms of the question asked, essentially 100% of our stormwater has to be retained on the site. And I heard discussions in the previous applicant regarding bioswales, rain gardens.
Passive design.
Passive design, exactly. I mean, those sorts of things in terms of stormwater lend themselves very nicely to this project. I mean, if you look at the front of the building, I mean, we elected to set that part of the building back so we would have landscaped areas in there that very, very easily become those rain garden areas, those bioswales in there. As Nora said, the full design of this is not developed, but we do have 2 rooftop garden areas in there where we certainly can introduce, and we do show landscaping up in those areas, but the opportunity for green roofs is certainly something that would be incorporated into what we are showing there for 2 reasons. I mean, first of all, it creates a more sustainable building, and at the same time, it creates a better environment for the residents. I mean, this is their home, and we want that to feel home-like. We are contemplating solar collecting on the roof of the building. We have a fairly substantial roof area up there, and while we have not analyzed exactly what our output of kilowatts can be, up there we have very, very good exposure.
The whole industrial park does,
Yes.
which is why we are emphasizing what would be this renewable and sustainable practice throughout Brooklyn, especially in our industrial
Certainly.
parks. And
Yeah.
so we want to understand what was assessed to elevate your design to embrace those practices. And so at the moment, you're saying your design is preliminary, but will consider all of the above.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, at this point, we haven't developed construction documents or, our electric loads and, those sorts of things at the schematic stage in here, but, certainly creating a building that has the smallest carbon footprint that it can, would be, a goal of this. Energy utilization is key. Once a building is constructed, your greatest cost is power to the building, but that aside, power is also a load upon all of us sitting in the room, and our responsibility to make sure that we minimize the use of that. We have an all masonry building here, which lends itself very nicely to passive collection. You don't see a lot of masonry buildings anymore, and this will be a masonry building. Certainly our envelope will exceed what the energy code requires. I heard previous discussion regarding windows and things, and that is something that we do as a matter of course. And certainly, if triple glazing was going to give us a better envelope, that would be something that that we would certainly consider for this. Essentially, based upon what the previous applicant had said, if you have, I think the word he was looking for is an argon-filled void between the glass and a refractive glazing. I mean, that is, the state of the art, at this point in terms of minimizing the amount of heat gain that you would get through that glass and creating the greatest amount of reflectance, essentially trying to keep your outside envelope as neutral as possible, containing what is in the environment of the interior to maintain either heating or cooling, depending upon the season. Also, air filtration is a major component of a passive design, for a building. This being something that is licensed by the Department of Health. The Department of Health actually requires a component of all of the HVAC systems where the air, as it's being drawn into the building, is monitored by a piece of equipment. When that filter needs to be serviced, that's called a manometer, and that manometer then says, hey, you know what, it's time to service this filter, because the air quality within the building is absolutely key, especially when we build an envelope that is much tighter than would be an existing building's envelope, or one built with less care. So that air quality is something that is very important. So, I mean, for us, getting an extremely energy efficient envelope is going to be key. That envelope does include the roof, and I agree with what you had said in the previous application. A white roof is nice, but that doesn't quite take it all the way to the levels that it should be. And those are very easy upfront things from my perspective as an architect, where adding those extra R value components of insulation to a roof specifically, because that's where a majority of your heat loss is, kind of like through your top of your head with a hat on. So those are the types of things that we design into every project that we do. We would, I would contemplate, which is again normal for us, we would be looking to NYSERDA, to be certain that we've got systems in there that meet their standards and are the highest energy efficiency. And there's a benefit, to really all of us, and especially to the owners, in that there are special credits and things that are available for that, lower funding things, but you have to meet all of their criteria, in order to get that. So all of those things would be our goals, in the actual development of the building.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And at this time, we want to hear from the public, and we want to make sure that we take into account many of the points that they're going to be expressing to the Borough President, to Councilmember Menchaca. And we want to make sure that we take 3 minutes per individual, so we hear from everyone tonight. And we're going to ask the team of the developer to remain, so that if we have any post questions, that those particular questions will be answered. We thank you for the presentation, and at this moment, we're going to open to the public this calendar item. So we'd like to call the first witness.
We have Varan Sanjal, and it'll be followed by Jita Nandan.
Good evening, Borough President Adams, Deputy Borough President Reyna, Councilmember Menchaca. I'm Varun Sanyal, and I serve as a project manager at the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce. I'm testifying on behalf of Carla A. Cicera, President and CEO of the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce, in support of the application submitted by Conover King Realty, LLC, on behalf of Oxford Nursing Home. The Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce is a membership-based business assistance organization that represents the interests of over 2,100 member businesses, as well as other businesses across the borough of Brooklyn. The Brooklyn Alliance is a non-for-profit economic development organization of BCC, which works to address the needs of businesses through direct business assistance programs. The application before you seeks a zoning map amendment to facilitate the development of a comprehensive center that includes a 200-bed nursing home and an ambulatory diagnostic treatment facility at 141 Conover Street in Red Hook. This facility will replace an existing obsolete Oxford nursing home currently located in Fort Greene. As an advocate for job creation in Brooklyn, we are very pleased that this project will create approximately 600 construction jobs and approximately 100 new permanent jobs. This will be of great value to the Red Hook community, as Oxford Nursing Home is committed to hiring within the community. An added value of having this facility in the neighborhood is that it will serve as an anchor that will increase the economic activity in the area, particularly the attraction and retention of mom and pop businesses, including food outlets. Currently, the Red Hook location cited for the project is underutilized, and this is a great opportunity to add a state-of-the-art new facility in the community with landscaping and street trees to beautify the space. Upon relocation of Red Hook, the Oxford Nursing Home will also serve as a healthcare facility to residents in the area by providing a range of services to the public based on local healthcare needs. It is also helpful to note that in the event of a disaster, the facility has the potential to serve as a relief center. We are aware that the Red Hook community has expressed some concerns regarding the height of the proposed building, but have been assured by the Oxford team that they have undertaken extensive outreach and with elected officials and community stakeholders to solicit public comments about the project. In response to the feedback that they provided, Oxford has modified the proposal and reduced the height and the bulk of the building and facade. More recently, this project received approval from Community Board 6. It is for these reasons that the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce supports this project and respectfully asks you to also lend your support. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on this matter.
Okay, again, Gita Nandan, followed by Deborah Raymond.
Good evening. My name is Geeta Nandan. I am the chair of the Red Hook New York Rising Community Reconstruction Planning Committee, and I am also founding principal architect at Threat Collective. We are a sustainable and resilient design firm. I represent sort of a committee of 15, and we were founded through the Governor's Office of Storm Recovery 3 years ago in the post-Sandy reconstruction that was started by the Governor's Office. And so our committee represents a wide range of representatives from the community, from SBIDC, representing manufacturing and industrial business interests, to small business owners, to local residents, to activists and designers and architects. But one of the really important things that I think needs to be addressed is that we bring our perspective is through the lens of resiliency. As we all know, Red Hook underwent some very serious flooding issues and took many years. We're still in recovery mode. I think we've recovered quite wonderfully, and it's really galvanized the community around this issue of resiliency. There are some amazing projects that are underway, from a community microgrid to an integrated flood protection system, et cetera. So we look at this project from a sort of a lens in a post-Sandy world on resiliency and sustainability. Many of my other committee members here are going to speak as well. So, and we will be submitting a much longer letter in opposition. Right now what I handed you were just the bullet points that capture the overall gist. So I'm gonna cover these very quickly, and other committee members will go into more depth. But I think one important thing to remember is that our committee, we all will be older, and we all very much support seniors. And our opposition is absolutely not against seniors or nursing homes. My parents are in their 80s. They will need a place to live. I would love for them to live right next door to me. I do not want them to live right next door to me in Red Hook, and that's because I do not want to have to worry about them when something happens, and something happens every year. People have to understand that Red Hook is on the waterfront edge of Brooklyn, and we are susceptible to climate change and storms and electrical outages on a daily basis. And so I very much support nursing homes. I want there to be a place for them to stay. I want it to be in a safe place. And I want it to be in a place that is sustainable and resilient and can contribute positively to the community. And so we would very much appreciate if Oxford could find a place that could service Red Hook and Carroll Gardens and sort of Borum Hill, and provide a greater, more central location where everybody could convene. And Is that my time? Okay, well, I will sort of, you have that document, and for us, the issues of context, the industrial, the rezoning of this location, just is not a positive contribution to our resilient neighborhood that is still trying to build itself back.
Deborah Raymond, followed by Danielle Hendricks.
Thank you for giving me a chance to speak. Thank you. I believe that in granting permission to a single group to develop a 24-hour, 9-story, 200-bed nursing home with ancillary facilities, which will be approximately, with the parapet wall, 93 feet high, will have unquestionably a negative impact on the majority of Red Hook residents. I can say I have a building that I own at 317 Van Brunt Street, which will be directly behind this project. And now, I will tell you, currently, parking has become a very big issue in Red Hook. The height, allowable height now, it's 3 stories, which basically is 30 feet. Okay, because Red Hook had been downzoned. I bought a building that's grandfathered in at 40 feet. Okay, and now the new developers are all providing parking because they realize without parking, they're not going to sell their units. So it's become Monday and Friday because of the parking regulations. It's almost impossible to find a space. So since I bought the house 5 days before Hurricane Sandy, bad timing, until now, I have seen a dramatic difference in the parking. It's become very constricted. And of course, this has nothing to do with the complex in there. My mom was in a nursing home a couple of years before she passed away, and I will tell you from visiting her, and it was a smaller place, that there are many visitors that come to see patients, depending on the size of their family, how sick they are. Just what I personally observed, any given day, usually some family members will come, and it's not one, it's not two, again, depending on the size of the family. So 53 parking spaces, okay, in an already overcrowded parking area. And now they're going to have 200 beds with visitors, with staff, with ancillary facilities. It's not, I will tell you, it's not physically possible in Red Hook. The current infrastructure will not support that kind of vehicular traffic. And trucks, I don't want to say, you know, I know deals were made with IKEA on where to bring the trucks down what street. And I will tell you, no matter what's negotiated, that's not always what happens. And the size of the tractor trailers that comes through Van Brunt Street, if any of you would take one trip to Van Brunt Street on any given day to observe it, you could see very readily. It's parking, one lane forward, one lane one way, one lane the other way, parking. That's it, there's nothing else there. And when a truck, you're not allowed to park within so many feet of a corner, and when God forbid a car makes a mistake, all of Red Hook, they have to go on the sidewalk, they have to move the garbage cans because the truck can't turn. So there's other things I have to say, but I think those were 2 important points, and again, thank you for my time.
Thank you.
Danielle Hendricks, followed by Mary Dunn Kyle.
Good evening, and thank you very much for this opportunity as well. I don't take too much of your time, only 2 things. I love when they say that they are coming up with a gigantic nursing home, and they are basically going to work on the behalf of the local people residing in Red Hook. 2 questions. One is they are going to help the people to really eventually use the facility if they do need medical support. The only medical institution that I know will do such a thing will be the hospital. They're not a hospital, they're a nursing home. Therefore, people are duped when they hear that they are going to be taken care of. That's not possible. The only way that we are eventually helped depends on your health insurance. If you have a health insurance, they will be in harmony with their nursing home. Maybe we will have the support. But if you do not have a health insurance that will be in harmony with their institution, you basically, good luck. 2, when they also talk on the behalf of the people, when the businesses, all restaurants and all of this, will eventually benefit, I have to tell you, I sing all over the city, exclusively in nursing home. That's what I do. Nobody goes out of the cafeteria. Number one, because it's cheap and people stay. When I do not want to eat in a nursing home, I get out, and I can promise you, I don't recognize any of their staff, and I sing all the time, 4 times a week. I never see a face from the staff of an institution. They all stay within, so don't tell me that they are trying to rework on our behalf. Thank you.
Mary Deneen Kyle, followed by Del Smitherman.
Thank you, all of you, for giving us your time. We appreciate it. 1 or 2 points right off the fact. They're just bullets, because there is so much. Though it seems as though the Community Board voted in favor at the public meeting held down in Red Hook, the group that spoke was overwhelmingly against the project. And some of those people who were members of the committee at the meeting said that they were not in favor of this, but when the vote came around, somehow their minds were changed. I find that very troubling. Number one, I'm looking at this in terms of realities and perceptions. Reality. This building is going in across the street from a public school. That means we have ambulances that will be competing with school children trying to cross on 8 different intersections that these ambulances will have to be coming down. The underutilized parking area that they speak about is where the school buses are parked. It's not underutilized, it's being used for its zoning purposes. The additional parking that they speak about that they are adding to it doesn't equate the entire loss of parking on the 4 blocks surrounding the facility. What happens to all of those people who've relied on those spots in this underutilized area to park near their homes? What they're giving, that's a perception. The power grid, was it Sunday? Right? We had 2 blow. We all heard it, right? Boom, and then the Today Show was out, okay? This is before you've even brought anything onto the project to start construction. It is a 2-lane road, single access, with overhead power. Overhead power. And you're gonna put something in that is basically, and could be, reality, something that turns into from 100, 200 room nursing center to 100 room motel, hotel, convention center. There are no restrictions against that once it goes in, all right? This is the thing. This neighborhood has been barraged in so many ways for so many decades, centuries going on. The point of it is this: it's up to this administration to decide whether or not you are willing to open the floodgates to development in a flood zone. That's up to you.
Del Smitherman, followed by Robin Gorman.
Good evening. Thank you, Office of the Borough President for Brooklyn. Thank you, Borough President Eric Adams, Diana Reyna, Deputy President, for inviting us to present tonight. My name is Del Smitherman. I'm the Field Director for 1199 SEIU, and I'm here to read our statement of support for the Oxford Nursing Home project, which was recently approved by Community Board 6. The dedicated caregivers at Oxford Nursing Home have a core mission to advocate for quality care for our residents, good jobs for workers, and social justice for our communities. We come here today in the spirit of that mission. To support Oxford Nursing Home's move to Red Hook, the rezoning of the future site from industrial to commercial, residential, and any additional permits and/or amendments necessary to finalize and approve the project. Oxford's current facility is outdated and no longer serves the best interests of the seniors and people with disabilities we care for. As working New Yorkers who are active in our communities, we recognize that there are some concerns when any zoning changes take place, but we know that Oxford has made amendments to the original construction plan to appease community concerns, and this is indicative of their willingness to listen and respond whenever issues are raised. We want to assure the Office of the Borough President and the wider community that Oxford is a trustworthy and honest employer with integrity, coming from the union. In our dealings with Oxford, they have always treated everyone with respect. Our shared values are caring, compassion, and fairness. We strongly believe our nursing home, including the managers, workers, residents, and residents' family, would be value added to the community and excellent new neighbors. Thank you.
Adele, I'm just curious on the staffing. Do you see a large number of your staff there that would not transfer to the new location, or do you believe that the travel aspect that Diana raised about the transportation is an issue? Do you see that as an issue at all?
Based on the numbers that were given in the proposal, we think that attrition number is about right.
Mm-hmm.
We have some of our staff that work at Oxford that are going to be soon be retiring. We have some that will not make the journey to Red Hook. And as far as transportation, public transportation goes, for many of our workers who go to Fort Greene right now, they utilize the G line, which would also be part of the utilization for coming into the new proposed site, especially if we have the shuttle service, which has been a commitment from the beginning when this proposal was brought to the union.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Robin Gorman, followed by Heidi Matson.
Hello, good evening, Borough President, Deputy Borough President. My name is Robin Goman, and I'm an elder law attorney, and I do a lot of work with seniors, and I do a lot of work with guardianship, and I travel throughout the borough, presenting at senior centers and also working with this client population. And I know for a fact that of my clients, no one ever wants to go to a nursing home. They are a necessary evil. I also know that there are a lot of challenges facing this community when it comes to how we're working with our elderly. But I'd like to make it clear that nursing homes it's a skilled nursing facility. It is the last resort. It's not assisted living. It's not relocating a senior who's stuck in a walk-up apartment and just needs an affordable apartment. This is an institution for medical care. I would also like to note that their proposal is, I believe, a spot zoning. Spot zoning refers to when you read about spot zoning, they talk about the comprehensive plan for the neighborhood, the comprehensive plan for the community. I don't understand how this project fits with a comprehensive community plan that heretofore has been oriented towards manufacturing. This is zone manufacturing. It's an industrial business zone. There are new businesses coming in. We have Ample Hills making ice cream. We have Red Hook Winery. We have businesses like this that are even part of what we export as Brooklyn to the rest of the world. And it seems like the comprehensive plan for the community was to encourage that. And now we have an application for a use that is inconsistent. As far as the certificate of need for the Department of Health, the certificate of need was issued in 2009. It was a contingent certificate of need. The Deputy Borough President asked, was that certificate of need issued with this physically specific site in mind? I haven't been able to find anything that says the Department of Health knowingly issued a certificate of need and continued to renew it for a manufacturing flood zone nursing home placement. Similarly, I would like to remind everybody that the Diagnostic and Treatment Center does not have a certificate of need. It is private health care. How does it fit into a comprehensive plan? It's not emergency services. In a neighborhood of only 10,000 people, where we already have an Adabo health clinic, and we have Methodist not too far away, we have NYU looking at developing an ambulatory center at Litch, is this necessary? Why would you locate a facility like this in a peninsula with no public access to transportation when there are other health facilities here? And as far as nursing homes in general and plans, in Brooklyn, we have a lot of shifts that are going on with nursing homes. We have nursing homes that are looking like they're closing down. Congregational nursing home in the center of Brooklyn, they can't pay their bills and they're turning away patients and their facility is going to close. There's a lot of questions to be answered about why do we need to take this particular parcel out of manufacturing, out of that comprehensive plan for Red Hook, and place vulnerable seniors here. Thank you.
Hetty Matheson, followed by Victor Hagman.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm reading a letter on behalf of Allison Reeves, who is a member of the Landmarks and Land Use Committee for Brooklyn Community Board 6, and who is also an architect. Dear all, I respectfully ask that you deny their application for the following main reasons. The 8-story project is completely out of scale with the surrounding buildings. It is out of scale with most of the neighborhood. In fact, a building of this height will set a precedent for larger development, which the community does not want. The site on Conover Street between King and Sullivan Streets is an inappropriate location for a nursing home and ambulatory care facility for many, many reasons. It's in a FEMA flood zone. This block was under approximately 4 to 5 feet of water during Superstorm Sandy. This area had no power for almost 2 weeks after Sandy. Vehicle access was restricted because of downed trees and other debris that blocked the roads. B, a large percentage of the deaths from Hurricane Katrina were elderly people who couldn't be evacuated. They want to knowingly put elderly patients in harm's way. This borders on criminal. We now know better. The surrounding roads are not wide enough for large traffic. The infrastructure, especially the sewer system, is already at peak capacity. The adjacent properties, except a few buildings along Van Brunt Street, all have existing commercial and industrial businesses on them. A nursing home will diminish the abilities of adjacent property and business owners to take full advantage of their properties. The additional traffic will slow deliveries for all businesses. The additional height will cast enormous shadows on an adjacent property, Pioneer Works, which has a huge, beautiful garden that kids and other nonprofit groups can use on a regular basis. Noise. Many of the adjacent properties depend on their relative isolation and industrial use for their work. Pioneer Works has an event venue, including an outdoor area, and truck lots and construction staging lots create noise. Elderly patients desire quiet and tend to go to bed early. This is clearly an incompatible use. The property is currently zoned M1. It had the zoning when the owners bought it, but now they're asking for a huge gift from the city in the way of increased property value and increased FAR. If they bought this property that didn't have the allowable use and zoning they needed, it shouldn't be the taxpayers and the surrounding community that pays for their mistake. This is a land grab. Spot zoning. Let's call it what it is. De facto spot zoning. The other lots in this project that Oxford is so generously including in their application are residential buildings that were grandfathered under the 1968 zoning map. They don't need the zoning changed in order to continue their use, so the benefit to them is minimal. This change is for the sole benefit of the nursing home owners. Thank you.
Victor Hagman, followed by Melissa Socredi. Victoria Hagman, sorry.
That's me.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for your time and staying late for us tonight. And I want to echo, firstly, what the borough president said was about listening and hearing to the community. Because you know what? Red Hook has an amazing community full of experts. We have architects, we have artists, we have land use experts. I have been in real estate for over 15 years doing development. I live in Red Hook. I'm a business owner. I was a victim of Hurricane Sandy, my business and my personal home. Ooh, I get a little upset even when I say that. And we lived in a war zone for 6 months. I was 6 months, I was homeless. Oh my God, I get upset. And I wanted to just thank you for, listening to us, the experts of Red Hook. I wanted to talk about this week, the cold storage facility closed on Beard Street for a rehab center. We have tremendous holes already into our land use and zoning. We don't need to then make more exceptions. We can have hotels in this zone. I don't know, as of right, we already have these huge gaps. So let's fix our zoning. Let's make a comprehensive plan for Red Hook instead of doing things one-off. That's what Red Hook needs. We need to work together through the New York Rising Committee, which has been studying and working for the last 3 years on developing and bettering the neighborhood. I want to talk about I'm a CB6 full member. I'm also on the Land Use Committee. The Land Use Committee, who's full of land use experts and Red Hook experts, voted this proposal down because they know that this is not in context what with Red Hook challenges are. So when we went to the full board, and this has been consistently the problem with Community Board 6, is that the needs of all of Brooklyn are constantly put before the needs of Red Hook. And Red Hook's needs are very specific and larger than any of us have the capacity to fix. We have CSOs constantly coming up our buildings at heavy rainfall. Today, had to make sure that my stop check valve and all that stuff, and put a plug in my shower so I didn't have to clean that all up. It's a constant problem having power outages last week twice in one day. And because of these challenges, I have spearheaded with Community Board 6 to create something very unique for Red Hook, which is called a Resiliency Committee that will, try to address some of the challenges that are very specific to Gowanus and Red Hook, where our voices really are not heard at the full board. And speaking that Brooklyn Chamber approved this project, I'm a Brooklyn Chamber member. I wrote to the Brooklyn Chamber. They did not reach out to any of the local businesses to actually think how it'll affect the community. It will close Nate's Pharmacy, it will close the Dabo, and it will have huge impacts on our neighborhood and the businesses that are there. Many of us will be priced out. The rents will go up. It will have something called the Whole Foods effect, which is now a coined term in real estate. I'm going to run out of time. I have so much more to say, and I hope we have an opportunity to talk more, Borough President.
Melissa Secreti, followed by Denise Oswald.
Hi, thank you. I'm going to be very brief. I didn't prepare. I'm an architect. I also am a business owner. I live on Beard Street, which is part of the current MX5. And there's been no development in MX5 of new buildings that haven't gone residential in that area. So you're taking away industrial and manufacturing. Once again, every empty lot in that MX5 district in which I live and work has gone residential. The other thing that I'm very involved in the FEMA, sorry, I'm not a great public speaker. In terms of, I've done a lot of projects on the North Fork in flood zones. And the fact that this is being considered in a flood zone is stupidity of the highest caliber. FEMA is also against this kind of use in a flood zone, and it risks our money from FEMA to Red Hook when you do this kind of thing. I know for a fact on the South Fork, I think it was Bridgehampton, FEMA came in, they audited, and they made a lot of people undo millions of dollars of building because it was against FEMA regulations. I know this for a fact, okay? So I don't think this is a wise use for this particular parcel. I think a nursing home's great. I just had to go through my mom having a cardiac version at 86 this week, and quite frankly, I would never let her be in a flood zone. My in-laws were in Long Beach, they were in their 80s, and trying to get to them was hell. My husband had to go through basically army, armed guards in Long Beach. So this is stupidity. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Denise Oswald, followed by John Buchanan.
Hello. This is a little off the cuff. I want to start by saying, and I appreciate, Eric Adams, what you said about this issue earlier, but if you really want to hear from the community, I think doing it the Tuesday before Christmas is not the best time to get the full turnout. My office is empty today, the subways are empty today, a lot of people are away. I think a lot of people who would want to give voice to this issue are not having a chance to. So to begin, I want to say that I agree with a lot of my fellow residents of Red Hook. I'm a 10-year plus resident. I'm also a small business owner. I'm not against the idea of a nursing home. I'm not against the idea of jobs, whether they're in construction or for the people who work in the nursing homes. But I think that that is kind of a ploy that loses sight of the fact that this is a completely inappropriately cited nursing home. I was here for Hurricane Sandy. I wonder if the people at Oxford and the other people in support of this initiative have actually walked around Red Hook or spent any time in Red Hook, have walked around that block, have seen what it's like there, or were in the neighborhood during that hurricane. I was without heat and hot water for 2 weeks, and I consider myself lucky because I only had 4 feet of water in my basement and I only lost my boiler. But there were people who were without heat and hot water for a lot longer. There were people who were without electricity for at least a month. I think Oxford's plan covers them for 72 hours. That's not enough time. That's nowhere near sufficient. I watched my elderly and infirm neighbor be evacuated from across the street. That was one person, and that was incredibly difficult and challenging. So I just think that this is just amazingly short-sighted, and I think in a way what it becomes is a Trojan horse, because when this doesn't work out, then it does come up for resale, then it does come up to become something else that the neighborhood doesn't want. I think that where it's cited is also really poorly thought out in terms of the manufacturing use that's there. Manufacturing is very important, not just to Red Hook, but to Brooklyn as a whole. I think it was in either Allison's letter or Robin mentioned, you have big successful businesses like Ample Hills who are very successful examples of the maker community that Brooklyn's become known for, who want to keep their manufacturing in Brooklyn, who are running out of adequate spaces to do it, and they're moving to Red Hook because that's a good place to do it. We need to retain those manufacturing zones, and there's just no way that if you allow a nursing home into that community that it's not going to come into conflict with the kind of businesses that already exist there. And they have a right to do the kind of businesses that they're currently conducting because it's zoned for that. But they're going to wind up losing that battle in the long term, and we don't want to see that. Red Hook as a community wants to support these businesses and these uses. Thank you.
I just want to respond to the statement about when we had this meeting. My office doesn't close down for Christmas. The city doesn't close down for Christmas. I will be here on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and all the days after. I'm a full-time borough president. If you come past this building at 2 in the morning, my light is on, working for the people of Brooklyn. We are responsible to fill the obligation of the community boards. If we do not take action based on when the community board takes action, we'll be violating the city charter. Not only did we have this hearing, we have the East New York hearing we held. We have the mayor's plans of rezoning that we held. So we have timetables that we have to live up to. And I live up to those timetables very well. I'm good at what I'm doing of running Borough Hall. I'm not just doing concerts in Brooklyn. I'm trying to make Brooklyn a place where we can raise healthy children and families.
Okay, again, John Buchanan, followed by Lisa Serrano.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm actually glad to be here tonight.
Bring the mic
I mean, City Hall looks great. It's a federal-style building. It's great. And it's dressed up for Christmas. I mean, I'm pleased to be here.
there's two resources that need to be protected in Red Hook. And those two resources are open skies and access to water. Matisse, when he came to New York, came to Red Hook and painted. Second, I live on Pioneer Street, and it's a clinic at the end of my block. And I go in there and have my prescriptions filled, and there's a full clinic there, and there's hardly anybody there. So I really don't see any community need for this large structure, which really makes me, why would they present in their drawings and photographs such in an imposing, huge building? You know, I mean, I don't understand that, but those two resources need to be protected in Red Hook.
Thank you.
Lisa Serrano, followed by Jack Salucci.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Serrano. I live at 352 Van Brunt, directly behind the property, the proposed site. The reason why I am opposed to this is because of the traffic that it would bring. On any given day, I live on the corner, I see numerous accidents on, you can say once a week, traffic jams. My children get on school buses and they've been held up because of traffic accidents. And also when this project was constructed, they have the nice facade of the building on King Street. There's nothing on King Street. It was warehouses and nothing. I live on Sullivan, where you have condos, you have townhouses, and you have a bunch of residential properties. On that street, at the end of the street, it says no truck traffic. So they're gonna have a loading zone where they're gonna have commercial vehicles coming in and out on a constant basis, ambulance services, everything, blocking up traffic, which sometimes is ridiculous in the morning, in the afternoon. I don't know when they did the traffic study, but it's not on a Monday morning during rush hour. Maybe at 5 o'clock or at 6 o'clock, but never at 8 o'clock. I watched an accident the other day with an MTA bus and a Snapple truck, smack dead in the center of the street, held up traffic for miles, for blocks. But when you have a loading zone coming where my children play, that's dangerous for children, for kids who are just starting to come out, Red Hook's starting to become a community again, all branched together, and you have now a big giant structure as this, dead smack in the middle of a residential area where children play, a loading zone, constant in and out driveway, parking spots diminished, half of the street going in, you're losing half of the street. Why should we get punished for something that somebody else wants a business? When I've owned my home for 18 years and I'm starting to enjoy it, my children are starting to enjoy it. I was a Hurricane Sandy victim. My babies were in diapers. I had to leave for 6 months. My whole first floor and my basement were gone. We had no way of getting out. Luckily, we had help. But we had nothing. There was nothing there for months. And to bring a big nursing home like this into our neighborhood, and in the event of another emergency, you're gonna have ambulances getting them people out. We barely got out. We barely had places to go. It's not the right location for this nursing home. Absolutely not. Thank you.
Jack Colucci, followed by Jim Tempakis.
Good evening, everybody. I'm watching the gentleman, his face, and everybody wanting against him. I'm a developer, and the worst I want to see is something not being developed. But developing something like this is, my property is here. This will just destroy. What I was going to start doing is developing in Red Hook. I had owned property in 80s to the 90s. Now I'm looking to start developing. This would be my first and last, if this is approved, because the neighborhood is just going to go in a direction that I see that it should go, and it will completely do a 180 turn, and this is not going to be for this community for sure. You probably bought the property for a song. You could sell it for $50 million and go buy and somewhere else, and you could build a place for cash. That's what you should do. Red Hook would do very well if we sold the property and we developed it right. No, you're still in business and you make a ton of money. That's all I could do for you, bro. Thank you.
Jim Tempakis, followed by John McGettrick.
I just wrote a couple of items down that I wanted to bring up to your attention. My name is Jim Tempakis. I'm a business owner in Red Hook and a property owner. I'm in an M11 zone. I'm a New York Rising Committee member as well. Property location Oxford is looking to convert is an M zone district in a flood zone A. City planning, EDC, and IDC are currently looking to assist Red Hook M zones to become productive as they once were for the local as well as the national and international markets. We have a shortage of manufacturing spaces, and by upgrading existing spaces, we will bring in skilled jobs and needed manufacturing. Being in a flood zone and witnessing all the effects of Hurricane Sandy, placing a nursing home in Red Hook to displace our manufacturing space is a bad idea. After Sandy, my machine shop, as well as many others, didn't have electricity for at least 2 weeks. Our 30 employees were unable to come into work due to the challenges of transportation. With the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel closed, traffic was backed up in all directions for miles. Gasoline and diesel fuel was only available in small quantities after waiting hours on lines. Getting into Red Hook and getting out of Red Hook was extremely challenging. Red Hook houses and Brooklyn Battery Tunnel are still doing repairs on their mechanical systems to be in good working order. If we suffer another Sandy or worse, the evacuation of these elderly residents will put their lives in jeopardy, as well as putting the local residents at risk, as efforts will be diluted to the nursing home and the local residents. Oxford Nursing Home should move their facility out of the flood zone and allow their space to be developed for the much-needed manufacturing, kitchen incubators, tech centers, et cetera, et cetera. Why put your residents at risk? That's all. Thank you.
John McGettrick, followed by Dan Wiley.
Good evening, and I would like to thank you very much for holding this hearing tonight. Just 2 points. I concur with the sentiments that were stated in opposition, and rather than reiterate them, I would only just mention that people say that we should ignore the advice of FEMA that says that these type of facilities should not be built in flood zones, and we should look elsewhere to locate them. That being said, the argument is made that we can ignore the FEMA advice. Unfortunately, that is at a great risk for Red Hook, because the $100 million that Red Hook has been in fact promised for its resiliency plan that is finally starting to get underway is dependent upon FEMA's approval. Subsequently, going against their advice on a small project for one individual as compared to the risk to an entire community is far too great. The second point that I would make is far too often, unfortunately, CB6 has been somewhat insensitive or even indifferent to the needs of the Red Hook community. This particular hearing was held at PS 27, more than a half a mile from the site. It was not handicapped accessible. It did not have any security at the location. And in fact, a former board member could not attend the meeting because she is disabled to some degree. 200 feet away from the site is PS 15, which is also directly across the street from public housing. It was available, it had security, and it was accessible for handicapped. This then leads us to question what level of fairness went into the evaluation process with regard to the board's vote. Thank you.
I'm sorry. The deputy was just asking, I was just asking Richard, your comment about FEMA's recommendation that sites like these should not be built in flood zone areas. Is that somewhere?
They advise it, they cannot impose it on the city, but they do say it should be, critical needs facilities should be, in fact, attempted to be located at other locations. We can try and get that for you.
Okay,
Yes.
can you please?
We will provide that to you.
Okay, and we will also reach out to FEMA, but if you have it readily available, can you please supply to Richard?
Yes, I definitely will.
Thank you.
And the only last comment that I didn't make is the importance of having meetings, public hearings, as close to the impacted area as possible. Many, many years ago, I was the executive director of the New York City Charter Implementation Committee. And in fact, one of the things we constantly focused on, when you were going to have a controversial action, you should always find a convenient place and a safe place for holding it as close to the impacted community as possible. And that was one of the guidelines all of those years back.
At the onset of this hearing, I asked that if there's some recommendations that the community would like to do, to let us know. And that is a recommendation I think is very helpful and thoughtful. And when we have issues like this, I'm going to tell my staff that we should look for a site within the community to hold a hearing. So I'm going to take your recommendation at hand. And thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Daniel Wiley, followed by Gabrielle Florine.
Thank you, Richard, and Borough President, and Deputy Borough President, and City Councilman. Carlos Menchaca, who I would just point out, of course, used to work in these walls on capital projects and was called to duty when Sandy hit with the wall of water to work with us in helping to coordinate the community, because as we know, the community are the first responders along with EMS and others, but really the community are the first line of defense because they can't be everywhere when a wall of water hits half the city. I'm Dan Wiley from Congresswoman Nydia Velasquez's office, and I just wanted to offer my services and work with Richard Barak on the FEMA issues. I just wanted to relay that the Congresswoman is taking vacation, so you have a right to vacation too, sir, if you would like it. The flood, Andrea Sansome, who handed Richard some paperwork, has been featured in the Wall Street Journal. She has become an expert on flood issues. And in fact, I have to keep up with her in talking to FEMA, but I have been speaking with FEMA, and I am looking to get some legal opinion. But I can tell you that there's a Presidential Executive Order 11988, which pertains to floodplain management, and basically applies to when federal activities or programs affect land use, that you have to take flood considerations, and in particular, if federal money is used, there's a requirement that you have to look for alternative sites. However, this project isn't necessarily taking direct federal money, but I am trying to get some interpretation if a majority of those who are getting services at this facility are using Medicare and Medicaid. Even if it's not to the letter of the law, I think there's an intent for federal uses that agencies do due diligence. And I would just point out that Councilman Carlos Menchaca, Karen Broughton from the Assistant Speaker, Felix Ortiz's office, and I were yesterday at the Red Hook Senior Center, which is holed up currently in the Mikio Center, which I would point out is not in the floodplain. It did not flood because it's close to high ground on Hamilton Avenue, which is on the edge of Red Hook. And that senior center was in the flood zone on Walcott Street, across from the library, in a basement space. And NYCHA had the foresight to see, let's not build it back where it was. Let's put it in a place where it's going to be protected. So our concern here is that for critical facilities, and I don't have to preach to you, I mean, I know you know, but for critical facilities, we should really worry about placing them in appropriate places where we're not putting a burden on the community. We know this is a Red Hook Peninsula, mostly landfill, two ways in and out, incredible truck and traffic jam situations on rush hour, particularly. And so if you have 200 residents who have mandatory evacuation, you're basically creating an island.
Dan, if you could wrap up.
Yeah, so you're basically creating an island. So I'm happy to work with your office in this issue. I just point out that NYU Langone was one of the highest FEMA grants in the country when it got its grant. So do we want to put these kind of facilities in that kind of situation? Thank you.
Gabrielle Florine, followed by Stefan Kondakis.
Hey, hello everybody. My name's Gabriel Florenz. I'm the director of Pioneer Works and helped start the space about 4 years ago. I've also been a resident of Red Hook for the past about 9 years. I guess, there's obviously everybody's concerns, which, we put a lot of energy into preserving our building, which is Pioneer Works, which we feel like is an integral part of the history of Red Hook. And to even think about a building double the height right next door, looming over it with kind of, architecture that some would consider, a monstrosity, it's very hard to stomach. So there's basically my knee-jerk reactions, which are just like, this is not the direction that anybody wants to see in the neighborhood, both visually and as far as thinking about how much traffic there is in the neighborhood. It's really hard to believe how there could be such, an ambulatory care system there. It just seems like it's completely unreasonable. I stand up here, as a skeptic. I think we all know how much private money influences developing, and to think about, I'm sitting up here and I'm not hearing any voices that are like, let's do this. We really want this nursing home. And if this goes through, I think there's such proof that I can't have faith in this process, because if a whole community is speaking out against something and there's a huge zoning change, then what is this process for? I mean, I'm not hearing anybody that's having any reasonable suggestions for why this needs to be here. And I totally respect developers as well and have no problem with the nursing home, obviously. And there are plenty of sites out of a flood zone that this could be. So I think that there's no reasonable sense for us to do this. And as far as also, we don't just put on concerts, and I think that if anybody of you have come by, we're a community center. We do the public school fundraiser free. We do Red Hook Initiative fundraiser free. We do the Friends of the Firefighters. We've had community meetings and Restore Red Hook meetings. And I want the space to be a kind of a town hall. And anytime you need a meeting of this sort of any nature, please come forward to us. And we would love that community dialogue to be part of our space. And please come visit. And I'm also obviously concerned, we're very respectful of our neighbors, and we've really love everybody so much in Red Hook for embracing our project, which at times is a little bit, on the avant-garde side. But we are very concerned about having elderly people right next door to us when we are having public programming. We're committed to free access and free space, and that does include concerts and performances that can get a little loud. And I'm obviously very concerned about the stresses that might happen between us and this project. So thank you for listening.
Stefan Kondakis, followed by Andrea Sasson.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for staying up so late with us for this. Hi, everybody. How are you? I'm just a constituent, essentially. That's how I'm speaking tonight. own a business. I live
If you
in
could
Red
state
Hook.
your name for the record, please. Thank
I'm
you.
sorry. I own a business. I live in Red Hook. It doesn't matter how long. And I just want to follow up very quickly on what John McEtrick and what Dan Wiley said about the executive order and the FEMA rules. There's a straight line between the executive order and Stephen Kondax, K-O-N-D-A-K-S. Thank you. There seems to be a straight line in the executive order between federal money and the stringent requirements of building in floodplains. Whether or not your facility belongs in that category of federal money, why lower the standard and change, and even go so far as to change zoning for critical facility? Because the nursing home follows under the definition of a critical facility in the FEMA regulations. And we all want to have higher standards and raise our standards all the time for the future of all of us. So that's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
Andrea Sasson, followed by Alex Washburn. Those are our last listed speakers. If anybody else wanted to speak and have not signed in, please go to the back for a speaker card.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Andrea Sansom. I'm a resident of Red Hook, and my house is still actually being rebuilt post-Sandy. It takes a long time to recover, and I feel that this proposal flies in the face of the resiliency mandate and the recovery that this community is working so hard to achieve. And also that those behind this project are really pretty recklessly downplaying our experience and the risk that we all face. And to propose, as others have said, placing vulnerable elderly residents in this isolated flood zone in a mandatory evacuation zone 1 is unconscionable. Should we face another major event, our first responders would be unduly strained. We've heard these points. I was really surprised that the broader community board reversed the earlier decision. So I would just like to request, and I don't know if this board talks to that board, but all community boards that have partial floodplain districts should educate their entire board as to what the resiliency mandates should be, so that when there is a vote, the little bit gets the benefit of everyone's education. I really feel that Red Hook is getting short shrift. Thank you.
Final speaker is Alex Washburn.
Thank you. My name is Alex Washburn. I'm a Red Hook resident, and I was formerly the chief urban designer in the Department of City Planning in the last administration, and now I'm a professor at the Stevens Institute of Technology, where I study the effect of storm surge on communities. And we have a network of 200 sensors out in the harbor, and I work with professors to see likely storms that might come up, under what conditions, under what degree of chances, and what we can do to protect ourselves and be more resilient. So my neighbors have spoken very eloquently about their concerns about this project. Also, something very interesting to point out their concerns that as a minority in CB6, we often have concerns that may not be addressed by that larger geographic entity. Interesting. But I want to talk about something operational today. And I was in government during the last 2 hurricanes, during Irene, during Sandy. And let me tell you what the hardest decision was. It wasn't where to put the police or where to send the National Guard, but it was before the storm hit. It was the question of whether to evacuate at all those people most at risk, the people in the hospitals, the people in the nursing homes. That's a really tough decision, because let me emphasize that flood prediction is all about chances. You really don't know when it's going to hit and exactly when it's going to hit. And you've got to make a political choice before it happens in enough time to get people out. but everything's against you. It's a tough choice, because if you move vulnerable people, you may hurt them, and then the storm never comes. Just wanted to put that little bit of perspective into the discussion, and I thank you all very, very much for hearing us and having us here, and very proud to be part of this process. Thank you. Oh, I'm against the project. All right. Sorry, that's the professor side of me. I explained the thing. Yes, I am against the project because I do not want to put either the people in the nursing home in harm's way or those in charge of making the decisions on evacuation in a very tough situation to make a very tough call. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. And, you know, I just really, it's imperative, I said at the start of this hearing that, you know, educated consumer is my best customer. And we really, I want you to know that this borough presidency, I'm a mindful, thoughtful, caring, compassionate individual. I spent 22 years standing on street corners as a cop protecting your children and families. I did not come to Borough Hall to go away from that. Between the hours of 6 and 10 at night, the deputy and I have at least 8 to 9 events that we do every day between those hours. I wanted to be here tonight, and so we had to coordinate so that I could be present with the deputy. We can have a hearing any day, and I could have staff here, and they will not hear you the way I will hear you. The reason that we have to time this is so I can be in front of you and respect you enough to listen to you directly and not have a surrogate in front of you. This is why we do this. If I'm absent, it's not because I don't care, it's because I'm doing the work of the 4th largest city in the most powerful country on the globe. Brooklyn is not just a county. We have 2.6 million people. This is not Topeka, Kansas. This is Brooklyn. And it's a large borough. 2.6 million people, 2.6 million opinions, and 2.6 million people want us somewhere in Brooklyn every night. And I try my best to be there, and I wanted to be here tonight to hear you directly so I can understand and make an intelligent decision on how do we move forward with this project. This is an important project. I understand the impact that many of you were traumatized what happened to Sandy. Even when someone introduced themselves as being Sandy, you still feel the pain of what happened during that hurricane. And we know that. And that's why we're taking our time to do this. That is why we're doing that. I am not a fast food borough president. I believe in this borough. I believe in this city. And I gave my life to serving and protecting it. I'm not elected to be served. I'm elected to serve you. And I'm going to serve you to the best of my ability. And some of you may not appreciate that until it's retrospective and someone else is here and you're going to say, we had a qualitative borough president that cared for us and was willing to listen to us and learn. And that's my role as a borough president. So this concludes our hearing. We're going to listen to your recommendation. Those who are watching this, you still have an opportunity to send to Ask Eric your comments on what you believe we should do around this issue. I want to remind them to do so. It's still open. I read all of my emails. I hear directly from the public all the time. Also want to let you know that the planning board is also holding hearings. What's the date of their hearings, Richard?
That's not been set yet.
Okay, the planning board would also be holding hearings, so you should come out and allow your voice to be heard no matter where you stand on this issue. It's about hearing the pros and cons and from people hearing directly from you. I thank those of you who came out. It's important. When something is important in our community, we should come out and allow our voices to be heard. I thank the recommendation that was made of doing local hearings. I told my staff that we're going to, when we have important issues like this, we're going to go on the ground and hold the hearings in the community. I thank you for your offer to allow us to use your space. And we're going to take you up on that offer. And if there are hearings that you believe need to take place in the community, let us know. We want to be a part of the rebuilding of Red Hook. We want those who have been there and have weathered the difficult times to have a voice in that. I want to be your voice. I want to be a great borough president. That's my goal. And I want to make sure that you know you will always have my ear. We won't always agree. I don't always agree with myself. But we will be respectful, we will be thoughtful, we will be mindful, and we will be kind and compassionate as we move this borough in the right direction. Thank you.